Hey everyone.
Don't leave anyone out here.
So my name is Sam Huber. I'm the founder of Advir. Thanks for inviting me here today. I'd like to share some tips about the immersive revolution and share 7 reasons why brands need to get into VR today. So a little bit about me. I'm a French entrepreneur based in London. Over the past 4 years, I've created a variety of ventures, some games, some apps that I end up selling. My latest venture, Kaut, is an e-commerce gamification platform. So we were working with a lot of brands and discussing with these brands, I kind of saw that something different was coming in terms of new ways to advertise their products. So my latest venture, Advir, which I'm here to talk about today, is looking at the future of advertising in this new medium that are VR and AR, and what it means in those immersive technologies. So first, before we get started, there's no question that VR at the moment is a tiny market. The figures show 5 million monthly users. That's excluding cardboard. But people that actually buy the device and use it on a monthly basis is about 5 million, so very, very small market. They use it about 10 minutes a day on average, and that means a total of 25 million hours of VR consumed every month. Now that might feel like a big number, but I don't know if any of you know how many hours of videos are consumed on a monthly basis, and that's 30 billion. So the VR industry is about 0.1% of the size of the video industry. So tiny market. So obviously for advertisers, it's not that attractive from the get-go because they can reach only a tiny amount of people for a limited amount of time. But as we will see, there are a lot of other reasons that make VR attractive. And before we get into that, I'd like to talk about, just look back at the history of media. So if you look at all the global media for the last 100, 200 years. So the newspaper, TV, the web, and mobile. So the first thing is that although there are really different ways to convey information, they have one factor in common. The reason why they became this global media and impacted the life of billions of people is because of advertising. Advertising has been the backbone of those media. It wasn't necessary to start. You always have some early adopters that can get the media to a certain level, but when the platform and the stakeholders need to make money, the best way to do that is to bring advertising. We're getting used to free content. We even reluctant to download mobile apps that cost 49p, so although that's a very small price point, so we're really getting used to free content, and that's not going to be any different for VR and AR. So if we want VR and AR to become this massive industry, to impact the life of billions of people, it will need to rely on advertising. And we will need to find a way to make advertising work for VR and AR. The second thing is that although these are really different ways, different media, their anatomy is actually quite similar. We can deconstruct that into 3 main elements. So let me explain. The first one is a layer, right? The layer is kind of the device that is between content and yourself. It's the actual piece of paper that you're holding, or the screen of a mobile or of a TV. There's always this kind of rectangle that limits where the information is. On top of that is your content that you're consuming. And alongside this, which makes the whole media profitable and go around, are the ads. And the ads and the content compete for your attention. So you can see this is a highly dysfunctional media because the interests of advertisers are not in line with your interest. And this has been true for the last 300 years, since the first ad was printed in a newspaper in 1705 or something like that. This is true for TV, for newspaper, for the web, for mobile. This hasn't evolved at all. Until now. VR, AR are coming. These are completely new ways to show information, share information. So what would happen if we were using the same intrusive model for advertising for VR and AR? Well, we would end up with something similar to this, right? This is an artist's view of what the world would look like if we were to use intrusive ads in VR, in AR. So you can see someone wearing goggles, and everything has been taken over by advertisers. All the real estate around them is filled with brands. It's very overwhelming and quite frankly not a place that I would like to live. So it's pretty clear that we need to find a way to do something differently in VR, because VR is a media revolution. It's drastically different in terms of how you present information. If you come back to the model I've talked about earlier with the layer, the content, and the ads, it doesn't apply to VR for the first time ever. There's no layer. There's no device between content and reality. Content is your new reality. It's a new world that people can explore. So as a result, you can't simply use intrusive ads and placement like that in the middle of the experience. The whole idea is to immerse users into an experience. Everything that takes that immersion away is very negative. So that's kind of our mission, is to find a solution for this. And we see this as a much bigger problem than a business problem. It's more of an industry problem. So we actually work with the VR and AR Association, which is a 4,000-member association that groups pretty much everyone working into VR these days. And one of the committee is the advertising committee. It's 10 companies, so we are chairing that. There is Google, Yahoo, the IAB, a bunch of agencies, and some other startups, so a wide range of companies. And the idea is to find best practice and really find standards for how to best advertise in VR. And following this, we also created a public committee that is not limited to 10 companies, which is the VR and AR Pledge, which is more of a commitment against intrusive ads in VR and AR. So any company can join this and get access to exclusive data. So that's basically what we're doing at Advir. We don't have all the solutions yet. We don't really know what to do, but we know what not to do. And I'd just like to share 3 of our major golden rules of advertising in VR. That if you don't respect them, the experience is going to be crap for sure. The first one is very obvious: you shall not intrude or interrupt. Like I said, VR, AR, it's all about being immersive. If you remind the user that actually this is just a simulation, the experience is terrible. So that's something you need to respect. The second one is you shall respect the story. Just being non-intrusive is one thing, but if you're in the middle of an ocean in VR and then you see something irrelevant like a plane, clearly that's just going to kill the immersion as well. So it needs to be in line with the storyline. And the third one is that you shall deliver value. If you are placing something in VR, it should actually enhance the experience and contribute to make this experience more immersive, more exciting, or something that the user wants to talk about. So these are the 3 main rules. And so the idea that we have basically following this is something similar to this. So we allow developers to tag areas of their games or of their apps in VR. And quite simply, they put tags wherever they want. They have complete control over this. And then on the click of a button, we send that inventory to advertising networks who can then bid and buy this inventory. So that's a very, very simple example with flat advertising. Obviously, we can go a lot further than this. Just another example, you can have Netflix playing on the TV. You can have, the kind of Red Bull, a magazine that you can actually open. So you can go very, very far in terms of interactivity. And so I'd like to show you a little video about that more in detail and what we think is the future of advertising.
Imagine a world where content blends with reality. A world for you to explore, but a world that feels like home. A world where everything is at your fingertips. A world to experience like never before. A world that you control. A world that is your canvas to share stories and write yours. This is your world.
Right, so you had a little preview of some of the case study we run, the brands we're working with, and also our work in augmented reality as well, which is just some tests that we're doing on the side at the moment. So yeah, basically we run some case studies. We place some ads in about 20 different VR experiences on Cardboard, on Gear VR. We had a couple of brands participating, some of them that you've seen, a couple of others as well. And this is all going to be compiled in a big white paper. It's not out yet, so I can't really give the brand-specific details, but I can give the figures that we actually found. So what you've seen in this video, we have three main types of advertising. The first one is display, right? So it's simply banners that are used on the web, and we can reuse actually in VR. So there's different ways to interact with it. And one way is that we obviously can track where people are looking, and when they look at something, we call that engagement, and the ad can become a 3D ad. So there's actually a change, a level of interactivity here. And if you look on the web, engagement on banner ads is very, very low. Engagement means people stopping to scroll, for example, to actually look at the display, and it's less than 1%. In VR, when we did our experiments, we had 18% engagement. Across all the ads in the experience, 18% of them were actually engaged with, meaning that people were looking at it for a certain period of time to trigger that animation. And the reason it's so much higher is simply because of the framework I mentioned earlier. The ads are not competing with the content. They're part of it. So when you explore something in VR, you also explore the ads. This engagement shot up to 23% when we had a fully interactive placement, like the shoe, so you can manipulate it, change color, send it, share it. This is even more engaging. And the most engaging in our experiment was the actual video, mostly because there is 3D audio, so basically that tracks your attention when you're walking, and hence you're giving it your attention. So almost a third of our users were actually watching that video, which is an amazing number compared to the web. The second thing that we measured was brand recall. So we put some of the users in the experience, and at the end we asked them, what brands did you see? If you do that on the web, Adweek, the newspaper, reports that about 25% of them will recall brands properly, which I think is very, very high, to be honest, because I'm just blind to ads on the web, and I think a lot of people are. During our experiment, because it's actually part of the content, we had 67% recall. So 67% of people were able to say, yeah, I've seen this Clash of Clans advertising, which is very, very high as well. And of course, the higher the brand recall, the more likely that these people are going to share, talk about it. So it's very important metrics for advertisers. The third reason why VR is valuable right now for brands is the data. We estimate that we can get around 10 times more data, capture 10 times more data than you would normally on the web. The main one being, of course, gaze tracking. So we know where people are looking, how long they're looking at something. So as part of the Advir solution, we also provide analytics, meaning that we are able to track all of this, where people look in the experience, how they engage with ads, which for a brand is something that they never had access to before. It's completely new. We actually have access to, we capture kind of three main measurements, which is viewability, so if the ad is around you somewhere, in the field of view, and in focus. And then we compute different ratios of those three metrics to give that back to advertisers, and they have access to something like that, a dashboard like this, where they can also see where the impressions have been looked at and extract trends based on the location and stuff like that. So really, really exclusive data that they wouldn't get anywhere else. Fourth reason is we want VR to be omni-channel. A lot of advertisers or brands think that VR is this kind of side experiment. They advertise on desktop, mobile, social, and then on the side they maybe do a little VR experiment. But we actually want to bring VR as part of the whole omni-channel strategy. So working with some big ad networks on the web, we actually have access to some of that data, so we can target someone in VR, retarget them on the web, and vice versa. So we can really track what they're doing. We're using web VR, obviously, which is the link between the web and VR. And so the idea is really for brands to start understanding how are the users interacting in VR, and maybe retarget them with a more interactive ad once they've already targeted them and shown interest on the web. So lots of really interesting play in between. Fifth reason, quite obvious, VR is PR. Like pretty much all the brands that we work with said they had positive PR as a result of an experience in VR. You don't need to do anything that is rocket science. You can be the first retailer to show your product in VR, the first gaming company, the first sports company. I mean, everything. If you're a big brand, it's all going to be written about in the press. So that's definitely a really interesting play right now. Another reason, which is more general, is that history favors early adopters. If you come early, you have time to learn, make mistakes. You can basically reach people before your competition gets to them. So there's this really interesting graph. So it's a bit messy, but you can see that the ROI is higher when you reach early majority. So when most of your competitors are not yet using that medium, but you can actually reach some users, yes, a small audience, but you don't have to compete against others. And you're able to learn and make mistakes so that when the competition comes, you're already one step forward. So that's why getting in early on all those media is important. If you look at the history, people getting in early on TV, on mobile, on Facebook ads, Snapchat, I mean, you always get disproportionate advantage at the beginning. And last but not least is cheap and easy. So most brands, advertisers, think of VR as something really expensive because they always think that they need to produce the content. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about leveraging the existing ecosystem, these 2,000 apps that already exist, that have an audience, that yes, it's quite small, 5 million people, but nonetheless an audience, and use that and just place your brands, place your product within this experience. And we can do that very, very cheaply. Just like on the web, when you want to advertise a new product, you don't necessarily create a new website. You actually use the ecosystem. And you only pay on impressions. So we're using the same model, what works for brands on the web, and trying to bring that into VR. That's about it. I'd just like to encourage you to check the VR and AR pledge, which is this commitment against intrusive advertising. Feel free to join. It's completely free, and you join great companies like Yahoo, and you get access to industry data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. And I'm so glad we got to see that, because the last time I was with this guy, we were on a panel and the audio was bad. So round of applause for Aaron on sound. Thank you very much.